welcome to the GameChangers. This is Jeff, Simon, and myself, Michael. And today we'll be discussing the three most influential coaches of the past probably 40 years. Tim Sheens, Craig Bellamy, and Wayne Bennett. We'll each have our own perspective on these three coaches, and we'll take turns just discussing them in turn. So, Simon, you want to start with Tim Sheens?
Yeah.
Geez, that's a surprise, Simon.
Yeah.
With that West Tigers jumper on.
He's influential to me. So Tim Sheens was a three-time Dally M Coach of the Year. His first role as a head coach was with Penrith in 1984. Now, Penrith came into the comp in 1967. Never qualified for a semi-finals. Tim Sheens took them to their first semi-final appearance in 85. He also took them to the final of a Panasonic Cup in 1987. He gave Penrith credibility. He unearthed stars like Greg Alexander and Brad Izzard, and before his time finished there at Penrith, he debuted such players as Mark Guyer and John Cartwright.
Simon, did he went from playing to basically coaching?
Correct.
Because his career, I think, finished early 80s, am I right?
Yeah, so he went from being a Penrith player, had a year off, and then became their coach in 84.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, he gave them instant credibility because they were the chocolate soldiers. They used to melt in the second half.
I remember a playoff semi-final. I think it was the year they made the semis.
Yeah,
against Manly. That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So, he put Penrith on the right path. And from there, in 1988, he signed with the Canberra Raiders. He had 9 seasons there from 88 to 1996. And his record there is phenomenal. In those 9 seasons, they only missed the semis once. He gave them their inaugural premiership, Canberra, in 89 when they beat Bellamy. 1990, they went back to back. And
89 would have hurt.
Yeah. Okay. 1990, they went back to back. They beat Penrith, and they almost completed the three-peat because 91 they got run down by Penrith in the grand final. So he did phenomenally well at Canberra. I even think 94 they won the comp again, his third premiership, and I still think, I wrote it down, their backline in 94 was fullback Brett Mullins, the wingers were Nagus and Nolan Andruku, the centres were Mal Meninga and Ruben Wiki, and the halves were Laurie Daly and Ricky Stewart. Now, to this day, I will say that is the greatest backline that's ever been assembled.
Simon, just on that, and we're talking about him winning 3 premierships, which is an incredible achievement in itself.
Yep.
But those names that you just rattled through, every one of them are internationals.
Correct.
You go to their forwards, Lomax, I think Bradley Clyde, Gary Coyne stated. I mean, he basically had, if they weren't State of Origin players, they were internationals. Now, I'm not saying that he's not a great coach. I just think that the talent in that side helped him achieve those 3 premierships, without a doubt.
I had a look earlier today, and out of that back line of 7, you got 1 immortal in Mal Meninga and 3 Hall of Famers in Ricky Stewart, Laurie Daly and Ruben Wiki.
Yeah.
And then you talk about a superstar like Mullins, who at his peak was probably the best fullback
in the world.
And I'm sure you're going to get onto his achievements or his non-achievements further down the track. Yeah. But I just think, whilst it's a great achievement winning 3 premierships, he did have the side to do it. Yeah. Is that a fair comment?
It is,
I think
but I'll say no coach can win without cattle.
There's no question about that.
I mean, there's some superstar sides in the NRL now that we all sit and scratch our head and say, what is this team not doing well?
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand. Okay, so at the end of 96, 97, there was the Super League season, and Super League wanted a strong competition, so they wanted Tim Sheens to go to the Cowboys. and they wanted them to be a force. So he was recruited there. Now he remained there till 2001. His time there it's quite forgettable. I mean, they didn't qualify for the semis in any of his 5 seasons, and they actually won the wooden spoon twice. I will say a little known fact about Tim Sheens' time in North Queensland. For him to take that job, I mean, there was no need for him to leave Canberra. He had won 3 premierships in 9 years. He could have stayed there forever. Now, he was promised by Super League that if he took the North Queensland job, that their 2 biggest rising stars that they had signed to Super League was Brett Comorley and Scott Hill. And they assured him he would get them at North Queensland and he could build a side around them. Then when the NRL was about to start and they had to cut teams, it was decided that Melbourne was going to come into the comp. And the NRL thought, well, we need Melbourne to be strong. So they sent Comorley and Hill to Melbourne, and they gave Tim Sheens, Noel Goldthorpe and Paul Green, who were at the latter stages of their career. And you got to think, in 99, Scott Hill and Brett Comorley were very instrumental in winning the Storm their maiden premiership.
Any particular reason you brought up 99, my friend?
No, just because.
Whilst I acknowledge the fact that he did lose 2 quality players in Comorley and Hill that he was supposed to get,
Yep.
with his reputation and with his record,
Yeah.
I just think that he could have done a little bit better, because those 5 years he was at North Queensland, they were horrible. I would say now that they were the laughingstock of the NRL and Super League.
Well, it was a horrible squad.
There's no question.
It was a weak
but
squad.
if you have a reputation of a great coach, which is what he did, and I'm not taking anything away from what he did at Canberra, but you would have thought with a reputation like his, they would have done a bit better. But as you said, you've got to have the cattle.
Yeah. So from there, he actually gets sacked from the Cowboys in the middle of 2001. He sits out 2002. Before 2002 is finished, he's announced as the West Tigers coach for 2003 onwards. Now, the West Tigers were founded in 2000. They were a mid-table side at best. They were always engulfed in publicity for on and off-field indiscretions. In 2004, the Tigers gave him an open checkbook, and he signed Scott Prince, Brett Hodgson, Todd Payton, Paul Fadawira.
As a West Tigers supporter, Simon, what were your first thoughts on him signing?
I'll be honest, I thought he had passed it. I thought, wow, okay, yep, great coach with great sides.
Yep.
He's going to be starting from the bottom with the West Tigers. Can he rebuild a side? He did it at Penrith, but this was 2003. He rebuilt Penrith in 84. It was 19 years.
It's a long time between.
Yeah, it was a long
drinks,
time between drinks. I thought he's going to give us credibility. 3-time premiership winning coach. These coaches don't become available every day. I said, give it a go.
Yeah.
So, of course, famously, the West Tigers win the comp in 2005. I still think, as you said, Canberra were chock full of talent. I think winning the 05 premiership with the West Tigers is his crowning glory.
Yeah,
they would not have won the grand final in 05 if they had any other coach.
Why do you say that? I'm interested because they played some Super Rugby League.
They did. They were a very small side.
Yeah.
They had a very small forward pack.
Yeah.
But they would run teams ragged. People like Anthony LaFranchi, Chris Hynington, Liam Fulton would just run teams ragged. And I just think with Scott Prince steering the ship, and at that time you had the sublime skills of Benji Marshall, who would just jump in and out of games.
Yeah.
You had Farah, who could, even at that age, destroy teams out of dummy half. I just think that no other coach would have allowed his team to play that way. And I'll even go so far as in the prelim final against St George, which the West Tigers were heavy underdogs.
Jeez, that's a bad memory.
Before the West Tigers ran on the field, they were just about to run on the field, he's grabbed Scott Prince, Brett Hodgson and Benji Marshall and said, come here. This is 5 minutes before they're about to run out for the biggest game of their lives. And he said, the first scrum we get, Hodgson, you go to 5'8", Benji, you go to second receiver. He goes, Mark Gasnier struggles with reading defence. I think we can get him. So first scrum, Hodjo go to 5'8", Benji go one outside him and run at Gasnier. Game starts, 2 minutes into the game, the Dragons make an error. We get a scrum feed 30 metres out from the Dragons line. Hodgson to 5'8", Benji, goose step, gets around Gasnier, scores the try. And St George were on the back foot for the whole game.
Yeah.
Now, he literally told them that. And when he said that to Scott Prince and Benji, they said, we've never practiced that. He goes, no, don't worry about it. And they said, well, what about Shane Elford? He's the centre. He goes, no, don't even tell him about it.
That's interesting because when you say they never practice it, watching the West Tigers that year, they played so much football off the cuff.
Yeah.
And I think, whilst you need great defence to win a premiership, and that's been proven over the years, I think Penrith and the West Tigers are the only teams since Penrith, I think it was 2003, that have had really bad defensive records and won premierships.
Yeah.
And if you look back on how they played some brilliant attacking football.
Yeah. They played to outscore the other side.
Whether the other side scored 30 points, they were confident they could score 34.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fair point.
I think as well, a great... it reflects well on Tim Sheens. West Tigers in 2005, one of the only teams I would say that I can remember that won a grand final without a big name forward enforcer, like they had players like John Scandalis, who was a tough player, don't get me wrong, great player. Wholehearted. Anthony LaFranchi, another tough player. Bengalir in the same mould. Yeah. Dean Hallertau. They didn't have one enormous big enforcer like your Nelson Asofa Solomon.
That's a great point, Michael. And I think back now, and I think people underestimate, maybe not so much the West Tigers supporters, but they underestimate the influence that Scott Prince had on that team, and the way he steered, and the way they steered him, around the park, and I think that showed when he left. I think he went to the Gold Coast, and how they've struggled since.
Correct.
He was just a massive influence on how they played. He was a massive influence on Benji.
Yeah.
It
let him float in and out of games.
Absolutely. Yeah. And had a bit of nous, and I think, as I say, people underestimated actually how good he was in game management.
Yeah.
If you watch that grand final back, Scott Prince controlled the entire game,
There's no
every
question.
single facet. And then when he left, you got to think. You speak about his influence on Benji. In 06, 07, even 08, Benji was at halfback. John Morris was there. They would put Benji to halfback and a
They
back
didn't know
rower
whether they were
at 5'8".
Martha or other.
Yeah, they did.
Honestly,
they had no idea.
It was a mess. So after 05, the West Tigers had a few injury sort of plagued years, but a real inconsistency sort of developed within the club, and this is where my only sort of criticism of Tim Sheens is, after the way that the Tigers won the comp in 05, I think other teams thought, well, Marshall and Farah, they're young, they're going to be around, so let's find a way to nullify that. So other teams got bigger, started picking bigger forward packs, started to develop the wrestle, and I don't think Tim Sheens ever gave Marshall and Farah a forward pack that was tough enough for them to consistently win big games. And that's my criticism.
I wouldn't say tough enough, more just strong and physically big enough.
There would be times we'd win 3 games in a row and then we'd just get ragdolled by the Titans.
But they were small. They were a small pack.
Yeah.
They were doing their best. They just
the
didn't
other
have
sides
an
were
enforcer.
the other sides were getting bigger.
Exactly.
And we didn't go
And I think Tim Sheens' way of thinking was, well, I've got a squad here.
Yeah.
I mean, you win a premiership in 2005, right? And I think a lot of sides, I'm not saying that they rest on their laurels, but the really good clubs and the strong clubs try and rebuild in the areas that they think they need to rebuild. I think what Tim Sheens did was he put his faith in a lot of players by re-signing them to long-term deals, and they may have been deserved, but Simon's right. A lot of sides have got bigger, a lot of sides got quicker, and they did get ragdolled. Yeah. And I don't think they made any concessions for that.
No.
Because when you think about it, I think, and you guys have followed them a lot closer than I have, they didn't make any major signings.
No.
Now,
the only 2 years after the grand final that were actually consistent good years where they challenged for the comp was 2010 and 11 when they finished top 4. Now that coincides with the signing of Gareth Ellis,
who's probably one of the best, in my view, one of the best imports to come to Australia.
And 2010 and 11 were the 2 best years that Keith Galloway had in his long career.
He played Test football.
Absolutely.
So
fair call.
Played
2 big bodies as well.
Yeah. So with that 10 and 11, but see, that side just lacked that killer instinct because 2010 we lost a great preliminary final to St George, who went on to win the comp and deserved.
I can go through that step by step if you like.
That's fine. But 2011, I believe, is the year the West Tigers should have won the comp again. Manly went on to win it. We beat Manly late in the season. We beat St George late in the season. We'd won 9 in a row. Just had that 20-minute period in the second half of the semi-final in the second week of the semis against the Warriors where we're in front 12-0, we're in front 18-6, we're in front 20-6. Just didn't put our foot on the throat and take them out of the game, and a couple of little scrappy errors, and we're out.
Benji and Robbie should have taken control.
But can I ask you this, Simon? In those 2 years where they did challenge, right? What do you think went wrong? I mean, were they the selections? Did they have players good enough?
Yeah, I believe the players were good enough to win those competitions. Yeah. As I said, St George beat us 13-12 in a prelim final. I've no qualms about that game. We competed at a really high level, and that was just a quality game of football. 2011, we beat ourselves.
Yeah.
And I just think it was a lack of just killer instinct, and I think if we had a couple of more hard-nosed players in the side, I think they would have delivered a grand final.
Yeah.
And in saying that, at the end of 2011, the Tigers signed Adam Blair, who was dubbed the best forward in the world.
So they saw they saw where they went wrong.
Yeah, and signed a guy who could ball play, who was king of the wrestle.
Yeah.
Coming out of the Melbourne system, had won comps there. So 2012, the Tigers were competition favourites. They were favourites to win the comp.
Seemed like the perfect signing.
It was the perfect signing for the West Tigers. For whatever reason, the mix wasn't right. Missed the semis. Do
you think, looking back now, do you think that he'd just gotten as much as he could out of them?
Well, my point is, we had to release Andrew Fafita to get Adam Blair. Now, if you're lacking a side that sort of lacks a bit of mongrel and needs a bit of an enforcer, looking back then, you should have kept Fafita.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but you know that's a really good point. I mean, I look back at that time, and I think he was there for 8 years. Am I right? 9 years.
10 seasons.
10 seasons, and I think 10 seasons.
It's a long time,
and you know, I just think looking back on how they played in the ensuing years, I just think that you know maybe the juices had run out. Maybe he'd gotten what he could out of those players. But yeah, I think I remember 2012. They were the favourites, and you know, and they just obviously faltered. But yeah.
So overall, 10 seasons. When the Tigers decided that they had to release Tim Sheens, and he still had 2 years left in his contract, so they had to pay him out. And the club went through a lot of financial turmoil. You got to think that was 9 seasons ago. I still haven't made the 8 since. So I'm not saying we should have kept him, but you know, nobody's done a better job since.
So overall, since the West Tigers have merged, and you are both West Tigers supporters.
Yep.
How would you define his performance at the West Tigers in the years that he was there? How would you describe his tenure?
Well, you have to you have to view it as a success as a whole because he gave us a title.
Yeah.
He won a comp, and then the 2010-11 team, he had 2 spikes.
Yeah.
He came close, very close in one of those spikes, and in the first spike he won.
Yeah.
Won a comp.
We hear a lot of people saying about coaches, have they left the place in a better position from when they started?
He did.
Yeah,
He did.
100%.
Undoubtedly.
Okay.
So that's Tim Sheens.
Interesting. Great record.
Yeah.
There's no question. You can't deny that.
No.
And everybody's got different views on his coaching.
Well, other than in the NRL era, or even going back to 1980, he's second only to Wayne Bennett. He's got 4 premierships, and Bennett's
got 7.
Bennett's got 7. So
Pretty fair record.
fair record.
I think I'm going to start with Craig Bellamy now.
Yep.
So he's considered maybe the best coach of the modern era. So he started his coaching career as an assistant coach at Brisbane.
Correct.
There was a lot of media hype around him as an assistant when Bennett and all the team stars were away on Origin duty, and they beat the Tigers, the baby Broncos they called them, and Bellamy was in charge.
I remember that. Yeah, that was at Campbelltown.
Yeah, it was.
And
What a horrific night.
so Bellamy was in control.
You trying to
of the
upset
side that day.
your little cohort over here, mate?
I can't
Bringing
even
back bad memories, my friend.
I can't remember it. And yeah, so the media jumped on that. He's a great up and coming coach. He then he bided his time at Brisbane and rejected offers from teams such as the Tigers.
Yep.
And then eventually ended up at Melbourne.
Yeah.
So that's obviously been an extremely successful period for him. Won the 2 grand finals that were taken off him in 07 and 09.
Deservedly so, I might add.
Deservedly so.
Yep. About that.
And then has subsequently won comps in 2012, 2017 and 2020.
Yeah.
So he's won 3 premierships with 2 taken off him. And I think obviously the main criticism of Bellamy being considered one of the all-time greats, which I think he is the fact, did he know about the salary cap cheating in from that 07 to whenever it was 10 period?
Jeff?
Without knowing the ins and outs on how rugby league clubs work and how their recruitment works and all that, I would imagine that a coach would have a massive influence on recruitment.
Yep.
Massive.
Yeah, I've thought about this.
You know, the signing
Especially
of players.
someone of his standing.
There's no question.
Yeah.
I think, and he would have earned that right after they won their first premiership.
Yeah.
I think, and I think as a coach, the more success you have, the more influence you have on re-signing players and so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
100%.
And I think coaches do know what players get paid, right?
Yeah.
So I think the answer to your question, Michael, is that in my eyes, there's no question he knew, like all the players and all of the management knew what was going on. And for people to come out to say differently, to me, it doesn't wash with me. Like as a player, for example, and I just finished reading.
Do you think the players as well?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, look, they're, without delving too much into what happened, a player's got 2 contracts in front of him. Yeah. They asked him to sign. I mean, you can't be that stupid, can you?
Yeah.
No, really.
That's right.
I mean, maybe some of the younger players, right, may not have known. Maybe their management dealt with it. I don't know. But a player needs to sign a contract. A manager can't sign a contract on their behalf.
No.
So the answer to the question, the short answer is yes, they did know.
Yeah.
But you know, his record, and I'll talk about that. He's probably had 3 of the greatest players of all time, right?
But they were nobodies when he got them.
There's no question about that.
Yeah.
No. I have no issue at all, and I would never, and I'm not here to question his coaching ability, because if we go back through history, even up until his last year that he's coached to a premiership, he's developed and he's brought players that are on the cusp of reserve grade and can't even get into first grade, and they're premiership winners, and they've improved.
That's right.
And we look back and players have gone to Melbourne, have become super players, even become state of origin players, have left and gone on to play at other clubs, and they haven't played at that level.
Correct.
So his ability to get the best out of players is unsurpassed.
Yeah.
There's just no question. My only, and this is not a criticism, to be in a role for that long is incredible. But I would love to see him at another club with different types of players to see whether he would have the same success. That is my only question. Yeah. Because his record speaks for itself, Michael. Yeah. Simon, it's just remarkable. Yeah.
Well, you speak about the players that he's able to get the best out of, and the ones he's let go. You've got the likes of Adam Blair, who was, as you said, considered maybe the best forward in the world, went on to achieve little success at the Tigers. Even players that were just considered tough, he got them to Origin and Test level, like Dallas Johnson. I struggle to think, if Dallas Johnson was at another club, he'd be a great worker, but would he be a Test or an Origin player?
Probably not. Yeah. I mean, the classic example, I think, is Dale Finucane.
Yeah.
I mean, Dale Finucane came from Canterbury. He admittedly, he was a first grader. But he actually went to another level. And he's now regarded as a premier second rower. And I don't know if any other club or any other coach could do that. I mean, he brought a bloke by the name of Brian Norrie.
Yeah.
And I read, as I said earlier, I read Cameron Smith's book, and Cameron Smith standing in the game is up there, and he talks about these underrated, or these so-called underrated players, and he speaks of Brian Norrie and how good he was and what a team player, and they just improve out of sight. Branko Lee is another one. Yeah. Josh Adokar came from Bellamy, reserve grade.
Yeah.
It's an incredible.
My thing is, and when you say you take Melbourne players out of that system, like I remember speaking to a Newcastle fan, and they were so excited because they were signing Tim Glasby. I said, he's an Origin proper. And I remember saying to him, don't forget, he's run off Cameron Smith for the last 5 years. So that means he gets every pass right here, it's perfect. I said, is that going to happen at Newcastle? Is that going to happen? And it does, and his career didn't kick on.
And then now within 2 years, 3 years, he's retired.
My other big thing is, now you'll see Tino, I can't pronounce his last name.
Fasua Malawi, whatever it is.
Big Tino's gone to the Gold Coast.
You're a genius. How the hell did you get that out?
Yeah. He's gone to the Gold Coast. Now that kid's now an Origin player. He's gone to the Gold Coast, and everyone, you wait now. The Gold Coast are going to be great because they've got Big Tino. Hang on, Tino is a bit player at the Storm. He generally comes on in the 25th minute. More likely than not, his team's up 12 or 16-0
on the back of Nelson Asafa.
Yeah, and Jesse Bromwich.
Asafa Solomon.
Thank you, mate. We've got an interpreter here, guys. Well done.
And he's got Jesse Bromwich and Kenny Bromwich, and just professionals.
Christian Welsh.
Well, I think this will be
professionals like Welsh. Now he's going to go to the Gold Coast. And I wish him all the success in the world. But now he's the guy they're going to look to. You're going to set the platform. Let's see if he can do that with.
Well, it's probably an interesting test case.
Yeah.
But
I look. The only two players who spring to mind who I can say left the Storm and their careers flourished were freaks like Inglis and Cronk. There's no other ones which they would have flourished anywhere because they are elite players.
Simon, that's an interesting point, but Cooper Cronk went to the Roosters.
Yeah, he didn't really.
On the back of...
He was a bit part player.
The Roosters have been successful since 2003.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he didn't play a big part, because he did. As a halfback, you do.
Yeah. But he was the Kiri was the main player.
There's no question.
Okay. How'd they go without him this year?
There's no, you're 100% correct. I'm just saying that the influence that Wayne Bennett has on players that come to his club is phenomenal. And we can't question that.
Yeah.
Right. But I think with Tino, especially with Tino and the raps that he's had this year, this will be a really good test case on how he goes.
Yeah.
Because the pressure, as Simon says, the pressure's going to be on him to do the job up front.
I'm backing him to succeed. I reckon he'll be a test player in the future.
My next question to you, Michael, with Craig Bellamy, is that he's had, and we don't know what Cameron Smith's doing yet. Let's say that he doesn't play.
Yep.
He's had the greatest player that we've ever seen with him in his whole coaching career. How do you think he's going to go without him?
I think they'll still succeed.
Yep.
On the back of
If his replacement's Harry Grant,
Harry
it's
Grant,
gonna go okay.
we've seen firsthand how much influence Harry Grant was carrying the Tigers.
Okay, Harry Grant's 21 years old, and I think, and I agree with you, he is one
22,
one super talent.
Correct.
Without he is a 10-year
Origin test player.
250, 300 Origin test, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
But is he mature enough to replace a player like Cameron Smith? And I would never question Melbourne, because I've done it in the past, thinking that they're going to slide, and they continue to do the same thing, right? And they continue to be up there. I'm not going to question them. But my question is, how is Craig Bellamy going to react to not having...
Well, I just think, as great as Cameron Smith is, he's 37, he's played over 400 games. This year, he was still in the top 7 or 8 players in the game.
Yep, I'd say top 5.
Okay, you get Harry Grant in that system, he'll be in the top 7 or 8 players in the game.
I'll ask you this one last question.
I don't think they'll skip a beat.
Okay. If Cameron Smith doesn't play last year, do they win the premiership?
No.
No.
And that's the problem that's the issue that I have, and the influence that I think Cameron Smith plays, and the benefit that it gives Craig Bellamy. And again, I'm not questioning Craig Bellamy, because it's there in black and white how good he is.
This is look at what we're talking about. We talk about how he identified Inglis, Slater, Cronk, Smith, Falau, all these Bromwich brothers, Tohu Harris,
Vunivalu,
all these players who he's identified. And now look, Cameron Smith's going to retire. They had Harry Grant, who, unless he was on loan to the Tigers, he was going to play for the Sunshine Falcons again.
He was their third string hooker.
He's their third string hooker, but he was identified. Why didn't the other 16 teams identify this kid?
Well,
he's a freak.
From what I've been told, Melbourne have got a great recruiting program in place. And,
that's nuts.
But look, as you quite rightly said, his record speaks for itself. And to be at a club for that long, and to do what he's done...
Especially being like an angry ant type of ranter and a raver. Usually those type of coaches have a very short shelf life. You know, you can scream at him, but mate, they listen to him and they respect him and they buy into what he says.
I've looked at coaches that have tried to replicate what Craig Bellamy does, and it's sort of, it's not in them.
Give me an example.
Adam O'Brien didn't go down too well with a couple of Newcastle players, and that's just one example. Craig Bellamy is just off the cuff. I think the important thing to note is Craig Bellamy actually loves the game of rugby league.
Yeah.
And he loves his players, and that's why we see this passion that comes out.
Yeah.
Yes, he's been blessed with superstars. Right? There's no question about that. But his record is remarkable.
Yeah. Gets a tick from me.
We'll move on to your man, Wayne Bennett.
I wouldn't say he's my man, but...
won the last St George comp.
Look, I think... we all obviously know who Wayne Bennett is and his record. And
goes without saying.
And obviously Wayne Bennett holds a special place in my heart as a St George supporter, which I'll get onto shortly. But my first memory of Wayne Bennett, it was 1984, and I wanted to watch that they showed the Brisbane Grand Final. So you might remember this.
Yeah, the Queensland Cup.
And
Winner Manly.
And Brisbane South, I think, Brisbane Souths were playing. I took particular interest in it because there was a young bloke by the name of John Elias who was of Lebanese descent.
Yep.
And I saw that Bellamy was playing, and I think that was the first time I'd seen Wayne Bennett or heard of Wayne Bennett as a coach. So, I mean, he probably started off on the right note, winning a premiership in Brisbane, because he had a fairly good record in Brisbane before he started coaching. And then he signed with Canberra, with Don Furner.
Correct.
And I think history tells us that Wayne Bennett played an instrumental part as the coach of Canberra.
Yep.
And Don Furner was in the background. And, you know, they basically came from nowhere because they'd only been in the comp for 5 years, you know, and to make the grand final against a star-studded Manly was a fairly good achievement. Yeah. And, you know, by 88, Brisbane had come into the competition, and on the back of Wayne Bennett's success, it was a no-brainer for them to sign him, you know, as their inaugural coach. Now, I remember in 88, the players that Brisbane had and the hype surrounding Brisbane.
It's a state of origin.
Yeah, it was a state with,
Lewis Langer.
Lewis Langer, Greg Dowling,
Yeah,
the Turtle, you know, all of those sorts of players. And I think back now on the hype regarding Brisbane in those days, but how difficult that would have been to blend all those players, because they all came from different clubs in Brisbane. Yeah. You know, they had a sprinkling of a couple of Sydney players like Chris Johns and Terry Madison. Yeah. So, you know, and I think people look at that and they think, well, you know, they should have probably had more success in the early days, you know, but that would have been a really difficult task, trying to gel all those players together. Yeah. But I think the most important decision he ever made was probably the right decision, because they succeeded after that. Oh. He had to make a really big call on Wally Lewis, who was obviously...
Wasn't popular.
It wasn't a popular decision. You know, he's obviously gone on to become an immortal.
I think he saw it as Alan Langer was the guy who was going to take this club forward, and I think Alfie might have just had too much respect for Wally. Alfie was never going to shine while Wally was in the side, and I think he thought, I've got Kevin Walters here, and I think he'll complement Langer better.
And as a coach, you've got to make those really hard decisions, and you do it every year. But to make it on one of the greatest Queenslanders of all time,
one of the greatest players of all time,
one of the greatest players of all time, it was a pretty brave decision. Thinking back, and it obviously, his decisions were justified, because they won back-to-back premierships in 92 and 93 against my club, and you know, and he was vindicated. And people continue to ask, and you know, people continue to say that he probably should have won more premierships, you know, with the teams that he had. But again, I come back to, you know, all these players with these big egos. You know, if you go back, Walters, Langer, you know, they had Gary Belcher, Greg Dow, all these players, and then you start to develop the younger blokes, and you've got to start making room for them. So, you know, you go back and look at his time at Brisbane, and I think he coached them for 18 years, 21 years. Yeah. You know, if you go back and as a supporter and say, can you give me 6 premierships in 21 years? I know what my answer would be, because when you work it out, that's one premiership every 3.5 years. Yeah. You know, I'd take that every day of the week. And I think as a St George supporter, when there were whispers coming out of Brisbane that he was going to sign, I've got to admit, I was not that I could do handstands, but I wanted to. I was really, really excited, because at that time, St George were going through a phase where it was basically, you know, they weren't improving. They needed an outside voice. Yeah. And he was the perfect man to do that. Now, 2008, Saints had made the semis, and Nathan Brown, who had coached them, started to bring a few young guys through. And I think Wayne benefited from that. Wayne Bennett benefited that in 2009. And he even says that to this day, that a lot of the players that he coached were already well coached. prior to him coming.
Yeah.
And I remember St George signing Wayne Bennett, and when it became official, and I said to one of my brothers, I said, we will win a premiership in his tenure at this club. I don't know when, but we will win a premiership.
Yeah.
And luckily for us, we did. And, he had, people look back, and we had tremendous success. We won 2 minor premierships.
Yeah.
We made the semi-finals. Our defence, which...
it was unbelievable.
You remember watching them in 2010, and you talk about 2011. My view on St George, we had a successful 2009. We were minor premiers. We got knocked out in straight sets, and people were saying, "Oh yeah, here we go again." Yeah. The chokers, and I think they came back in 2010, Simon, with this really steely resolve, and their defence was just remarkable.
But see, and this is where, if I can criticise Tim Sheens at all, is we always say, "Oh, the Tigers they had a small forward pack," and well, St George's back row when they won the comp was Dean Young,
Ben Craig,
and Neville Costigan.
Throw in Jared Safi.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is Dean Young and Neville Costigan are small forwards, but it's attitude.
100%. And
it's attitude, mate. And he coached them to be animals for 80 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
And they played for him.
That's coaching, and they played for him.
And people will tell you now, I've read numerous books on people that talk about Wayne Bennett. Wayne Bennett's technical nous on the game isn't great.
Yeah, he's a man manager.
He's a man manager, and they absolutely play for him. Yeah. And the thing with Wayne Bennett is that he surrounds himself with good people. He surrounds himself with people that know the game. He knows how to get the best out of people, and it was proven.
Surround yourself with assistant coaches who don't want your job.
There are absolutely 100%. And his record. I think in all the time that he's coached, and we go back to his first premiership, and I say this with no bias whatsoever. I honestly believe his 2010 premiership was his crowning glory, because St George were renowned as we had a soft underbelly, and if you go through our roster compared to what Brisbane had, right? I mean, I know his performance in 2006, I think it was, Simon, when they beat Melbourne. Yeah. That was a remarkable achievement. Yeah. But if we look at the rosters compared to what Brisbane had, right, and the teams, his performance at St George was remarkable. Yeah. And 2011, I still believe to this day that our start to 2011, which is so hard to do after winning the
6 points clear in the morning.
We were 6 points clear, and then State of Origin just absolutely, and that's what comes with success. You start to get more players in State of Origin, and it just came back. And
who was there that year in 11? Was it Wayne?
Wayne Bennett. We had him in 9, 10. Soward got picked. Ben Hornby got picked. Yeah. Mark Gasnier, Matt Cooper, the Morris boy, Brett Morris. We had 7. Dean. We had 7 Origin players. Yeah. And to take that out of basically a premiership winning team, we really struggled.
Yeah, I ran out of gas.
We did our start to that. We were playing better football then in 2011 what we were in 2010.
In 2006 when he won with Brisbane, I mean, he had Justin Hodges, Lockyer, Webke, Seven-Aceva. You're talking all-time people here.
Absolutely.
The Dragons had no out-and-out superstars.
Simon, from memory, I think we had, I'll stand corrected, I think we probably had 2 or 3 State of Origin players. Because Mark Gasnier had just come back. Yeah. Right? Matt Cooper was an Origin player, and Brett Morris were Origin players. Yeah. They were the only 2. I might be wrong. Yeah. But he developed these players. They became better players because of him.
That's right.
Right? Because a lot of these players were in our system. And he threw in, Neville Costigan. Jared Safi was starting to come through. Bo Scott, Matt Pryor. These blokes, they just stood up and they played for him. Yeah. To say that I was devastated when he left, I was. But you know what? He gave me a premiership that that I wanted. And people talk about his demeanour and how abrasive he is, and how how he talks to certain reporters and doesn't talk to certain reporters. I mean, if I wasn't a St George supporter and I looked at it, I'd say, well, you know what, this bloke's a real dick.
Yeah.
And that's how people look at it.
But you can tell he despises the media.
And I've always wondered why though, Simon.
Yeah.
You know,
it might be
I'd love to ask him that question.
like an off-the-cuff remark that a journalist has made, and in his eyes he probably thinks...
I reckon it's probably just the fact that he's so involved with his players and they hassle the players.
Yeah.
So do you think he's trying to defend his players?
Yeah.
Do you think he's trying to protect them?
Yeah, I think he does it.
Yeah.
You can tell he did it with even Latrell this year.
And I think he did it with...
That was the one
he did it a lot with Darius as well.
Yeah.
So when he left, obviously I was disappointed, and then he went, and I think he would call them tumultuous years at Newcastle, you know, which was pretty tough, you know, with what was going on with Nathan Tinkler and you know, and
Alex McKinnon, which was just obviously heartbreaking for everybody, not just him, but everybody in rugby league. And you know, he did make a prelim final. Yeah,
you know, in his tenure there, but. And then obviously he went on to Souths, and I think this is his third year. They've made 2 prelim finals, and you know, and we'll obviously discuss this a bit further down the track in our pre-season. But I still think that they're my smokies to win the premiership.
I will say that 2021, I think is his greatest. I think it's South's greatest opportunity to win the comp. I think they deserve favourites.
Whilst this is Wayne Bennett's last year, do you think his time's up as a coach? Well, I'll ask both of you.
I don't know where he goes.
Yeah, I don't know where we go. I personally don't think it's over, only because, like you said, he's not a great tactical coach. He's a man manager, and you know, when he left the Broncos, someone asked me, "How do you think he'll go at St George?" And I actually said, I don't know. I said he's like a father figure to the Broncos. I said, but now is he going to be like a grandfather figure because he's getting older and older? But if he's simply there to motivate and get the best out of a group of rugby league players, I think he can keep going.
Well, he's still, you see the influence he has on people like Latrell. Yeah. So it's not like he's losing influence. He's still, and that's the biggest aspect of his coaching.
I have a view that if they announce a new team coming in,
a Brisbane team,
which it will be.
They would be dumb if they did not get him to do it.
I think he will at least coach them for a year, or in some capacity. You look, the guy's 71.
Okay, put it to you this way: if he didn't coach Queensland in Origin this year,
I was about to say we have to mention that. You have to mention that.
It'd be 3-0.
It would be 3-0.
It's actually ridiculous. It's ridiculous what he did with that team.
Well, I'll tell you what was even more remarkable, right? If we go back to the vision of State of Origin 2, when he was in the dressing room smiling and being happy, it came out and you could see it. He was telling his players, listen guys, our third game's in Brisbane, right? I think deep down he knew that they were going to lose that game.
Yeah.
Right, but he knew that he could get them up for that third game.
Of course he could.
And it was there.
Like, you tell me, and I mean no disrespect to these people, but if I would have told you at the start of 2020, Queensland are going to be playing New South Wales, and their back line will consist of Edric Lee, Brenko Lee,
AJ
Brimson, and Corey Allen.
I would have thought you were going to mention another Lee.
Yeah. If I would have said they would have got within 30 points of New South Wales, you would have said I'm dreaming.
No, there's no. I agree with that.
And that's coaching, mate, and that's great coaching.
And there is your example, Michael, of players playing for their coach. You can be the most tactical coach in the game. You can be an absolute genius, like the Brisbane coach that was sacked, Anthony Seibold.
Yeah.
From what people tell me, wonderful guy. Yeah. But sometimes too much knowledge. We're talking rugby league players who, and again, no disrespect, a lot of them finish school early. They don't go to university. They don't have the social skills of a lot of people, right? To feed them stuff and to be too technical with them, it just doesn't work. And that's what Wayne Bennett's greatest success is. He knows how to relate to certain people, and he knows how to get the best of them.
Yeah.
So in my eyes, he and his record will tell you he's the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah. My thing, if we're going to talk about other coaches, and there's a group of coaches that are sort of, I always put in the same sort of category, where you can tell that they have a great amount of knowledge, and they're probably great assistant coaches. But if I would put like Jason Taylor, Stephen Kearney, Matthew Elliott, Brian Smith, those type of coaches, you can obviously they have a great knowledge of rugby league, but for whatever reason, whether they overthink rugby league or they overcoach, I don't know what it is, but there's a reason why they didn't get the ultimate. And it doesn't matter what you say. Coaches are going to be judged by premierships. That's how you're going to judge a coach.
We can't sugarcoat that at all.
No.
Right? Ultimately, it's driven by success. Right? My view on coaching in this day and age, I go and watch a lot of junior rugby league games of footy. I'm a footy head.
Yeah.
I look at, rugby league teams and junior rep teams, 15, 16, 17. And to me, everything looks so structured.
Yeah.
I just think at that age, we want to see their skill, right? I'm not a believer in playing left and right and left. Not at that age group. I understand that they're grooming them to play rugby league. My issue is that coaches at that age think they're first grade coaches. Let's remember, they're 16 first grade coaches. Yeah. Not everybody can be a first grade coach.
Yeah.
And Simon, you were right. Coaches overcoach. Yeah. They actually think, because it's a tough gig.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, not many people can do it.
No.
But the issue I have is they think they try and outsmart themselves, and they actually think that they're smarter than what they are. Rugby league is a simple game.
Yeah. I love the press conference after. They've been whipped by 20. And they get asked, and you can see them thinking, how am I going to answer this?
Well, the classic example is Des Hasler. What?
He talks in tongues.
Talks in tongues and he talks in riddles. But I will say this, he has improved. Someone's obviously spoken to him. Yeah. Because now he's giving proper answers. Yeah. But a lot of coaches will talk in riddle to try and baffle you with their rubbish.
Yeah, it's like political speak.
But people like you and me, who have been around the game a lot longer than what Michael, we can see through that. We're not experts.
No.
But as I say, rugby league is a simple game. I've always been taught, if you run harder than the opposition, if you tackle harder than the opposition, 9 times out of 10, you're going to win the game of footy.
That's right.
They overcoach.
Well, if we're going to talk about Craig Bellamy being one of the greatest coaches of all time, his win percentage, I think, is 60%.
Correct.
So the greatest coach of all time loses 4 games out of every 10. So it's a fine line between success and failure.
It doesn't matter what we do in life, it's always judged by winning or losing.
Correct.
But for some unknown reason, we still get coaches that get coaching jobs, right? In the NRL, based on what clubs think they can do. That's right. But we have to remember, right? There are a lot of coaches out there that are very good at developing players. See, again, I've got a theory. There are 2 types of coaches. Coaches that coach for today and coaches that coach for tomorrow. Yeah. The ones that coach for today are looking over their shoulder because they're under pressure.
A lot of coaches are selfish.
No question.
And it's probably tough not to be, because they probably think, I've got a 3-year window here. Am I going to blood all these 19 and 20-year-olds, or am I going to just stick with the old who's going to,
Can I quickly give you a quick example of coaching for today and coaching for tomorrow?
Go.
And I'll talk about my club. And I'm very, as you know me quite well, so I'm not very, I don't bag my club very often. No. But Paul McGregor is a classic example. Yeah. Unfortunately, the players weren't playing for him. Right? So Paul McGregor had to make a decision. Does he stick with his tried and true to get him out of this rut, to try and get him a new contract?
Well, the captain was playing for him. Cameron McInnes was playing for him. He loved him.
You saw it the last game of the year. He loved him.
One player.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they weren't. So Paul McGregor had to make a decision. Do I get rid of these blokes that aren't putting in and start developing these young blokes? Unfortunately, it didn't happen.
No.
Dean Young takes over for 6 weeks, and his first press conference, I'm going to start developing these young blokes. We saw, I think, 3 debuts.
Yep.
Right? Dean Young had a massive opportunity for 6 weeks to pick players, that he thought they were ready for first grade, because he did tell the public and the supporters, but didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the issue I have. Coaches that coach for today.
He probably thought I'm half a chance of getting the job.
There's no question. So instead of his record saying 1 and 5,
yeah,
right?
It'd be better if it said 3 and 3.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll probably wrap it up there.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. We'll probably be doing monthly episodes, I'd say.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be doing a 2021 season preview.
On the premiers, which I think might be St George, guys.
So thanks for listening to the Game Changers podcast, a fan's perspective on rugby league. Hope to get you listening again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.